What's up, anime enthusiasts? Anime Cynic is back after a short and yet very long break. It's been a minute since I made a video, and to be honest, I don't really have any excuses for that. There was no family emergency or any one big thing to stop me from making videos. I've just been lazing around like an idiot for this past week and a half. To make matters worse, my interest in anime is at an all-time low right now. This season has been boring me to death so far, and I've mainly just been rewatching old favorites. I'll talk more about that at the end of the video, so for now, let's just jump into the topic at hand. Where should you watch your anime? Seems like a weird question, but it's one that has actually come up several times in my life, and I'm sure many of you out there have had similar experiences. So let's break this down as best we can, firstly by going over your different options, then after that I'll give an overview and some pros and cons about each. In my mind, there's really only four main choices for watching anime: Crunhyroll, Netflix, purchased media, and illegal streaming sites. For illegal sites, there's literally hundreds of options, including YouTube, but they're all being lumped into the same category for this video. These are by no means the only four ways to watch anime, but they are the four that I believe make up a large majority of anime viewing. So where to begin? Well, like I said earlier, I'm going to go over each potential viewing method one by one and do a little bit of an overview and some pros and cons. Where to start though? Well, none other than the Weeb Goliath website extraordinaire, Crunchyroll. As made obvious by my Crunchyroll adventure videos, this is the site I primarily use for watching anime. Don't worry about any bias towards it on my end though, because I really don't feel especially good about it. Crunchyroll is as close to the normie option as anime viewing gets, and I think most people are familiar enough with it that I don't need to explain it in great detail. Nevertheless, I'll give an overview of it briefly. Crunchyroll is a website and app that allows you to view anime while paying a monthly subscription fee. That fee also grants you access to their library of manga, but it's so overwhelming we aren't going to even acknowledge that aspect of the service at all. You also get some real people media in the form of dramas, but again, that's such a tiny percent of Crunchyroll's total library, it would be unfair to include it in this evaluation. Plus, we're talking about anime only here, so these little extras are dumb and also worthless to us. Let's talk pros and cons for Crunchyroll, starting out with pros. Firstly, it's a pretty convenient option. Their website and app may not be the best, but they do work, which can't be said for a lot of their illegal competition. And they get some high-profile new releases. On top of that, you are supporting the anime creators, although they get such a tiny percentage of your monthly payment, I don't think you should feel too high and mighty about it. That actually used to be a huge selling point for Crunchyroll, that they were a 100% legit operation that supported the creators of anime. This moral high ground doesn't make up for the huge amount of issues though. Firstly, their app is just mediocre at best, and the new player on their website is an improvement over the last one, but still has plenty of issues. But that isn't the most damning problem Crunchyroll has. That would be selection. New releases have been a problem lately for Crunchyroll, with them missing out on streaming rights for some pretty high-profile shows in recent months. I'm sure some Crunchyroll executive was shedding a tear every night that One Punch Season 2 was on another platform. But a few big anime not being added to Crunchyroll wouldn't be that bad. Obviously, it isn't ideal, but it sure isn't a total deal breaker. However, that's only one facet of the problem we labeled as selection. Maintaining the existing library has proved to be an issue for our boys at Crunchyroll as well. And I mean issue with a capital SU. I'm not some great crispy round detective either. I'd be willing to bet people watching this video have picked up on anime disappearing around here. Now, this issue is actually a pretty big one, and I plan to cover it in more detail when I can find some good info cataloging specific losses over time. In summary, I'd say this: Crunchyroll is the easiest option out there. It's fairly cheap, all things considered, and has a good enough selection to keep its value high. For now, at least. If this loss continues in the future at the rate it is now, I'm not sure what that'll mean for Crunchyroll, but I hope for their sake they step it up. Would recommend for someone trying to get into anime that needs a good selection and some proper dubs. Let us move on, brethren, to possibly the quickest choice on this list: purchased media. This one is the most self-explanatory out of the bunch. If you buy it, that would be purchased media, primarily being physical merchandise like Blu-ray sets. What about its pros and cons? Well, those two are very simple and quick to go over. Main pro you're getting with something like a Blu-ray is infinite rewatches and shareability. If you have a friend that wants to watch some Inuyasha, you can just lend them your Blu-ray Discarino. On top of that, most Blu-ray sets come with extra content that you may not normally get. Standalone openings and other songs, things like that. In terms of cons, they too are basic. I suppose storage has to be considered when buying physical discs and cases, but to be honest, that's basically a non-issue for this category. Really, the one main con is that it is hella expensive. You may think, well, it's only like $70 for a Blu-ray set and you get the whole anime and those extras. And I agree with you that a standalone Blu-ray set is not a big deal in terms of cost, but if we're talking about using that as your primary way of viewing anime, dear God does that add up fast. Plus, a lot of anime will have multiple Blu-ray sets you need to buy as well. Overall, physical anime-related things are a different story for each person, so dive into this at your own risk. Doable, but maybe not ideal. Now how about an up-and-comer? And by up-and-comer, I mean a titan of industry that has recently begun shifting its focus to capture a larger portion of a long-standing, already existing market. Netflix. Sure, they've had some anime since the start, and they've been around for eons, but only recently have they really begun stepping their anime game up, releasing some compelling originals in recent months, one of which I made a video about a couple weeks back. You should go check it out after this video, link in the description. Hopefully going forward, they can keep pushing it and acquiring new titles and originals. Pros of Netflix are pretty much the same as Crunchyroll, just of a higher level. Their website and app work well and are perfectly convenient ways to watch anime. On top of that, you get their normal People Media library, which is much more expansive. Cons are also similar to Crunchyroll, but again, of a higher degree. If you thought the selection on Crunchyroll was sparse, then prepare yourself for heartbreak with Netflix. They basically have nothing. Maybe 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of all the anime out there. It's more expensive than Crunchyroll, but if you're a hybrid weeb like me that still enjoys movies and TV shows, then I would say it's worth it to have Netflix. Now on to our only controversial entry, illegal streaming sites. I don't want to mention any sites in particular because I'm not trying to further their ill-gotten gains, and I'm sure you guys know quite a few, plus there's like literally thousands of them, YouTube being one of them, but I don't really imagine many people watch full episodes with a bunch of shitty overlays and a tiny box taking up 30% or less of the screen. Functionality varies from site to site, and most of them will infect your devices with about 700 viruses per episode watched. Unlike Crunchyroll and Netflix, these titles are not licensed, and so you aren't directly supporting the anime in any way if you use these sites. I'm not trying to judge either. In my opinion, these sites serve an important role in the anime landscape. Without them, we would basically be prisoners of Crunchyroll, and they would have zero incentive to improve and be competitive. Companies having a monopoly on markets is usually a bad thing for consumers, so these sites keeping the legal options in line is kind of beneficial to us. Where to start with the pros and cons, though? Well, I would say the biggest pro illegal sites have going for them is selection. Very rarely will you not be able to find an anime on one of them. On top of that, they are free to use, being supported by ads that you can even sometimes disable. Cons aplenty here, though. Danger being the most noteworthy among them. You really can't trust these sites, as intrusive pop-up ads are kind of their bread and butter. Convenience is also at an all-time minimum. You're lucky if a lot of these sites even have a mobile version, let alone any kind of safe-to-use app. And if you care about that sort of thing, there is a moral dilemma of you stealing anime while using them, I guess. So now that we've gone over your options and some of their pros and cons, which should you use? Well, if you could only pick one single option, then it would be pretty hard to argue against illegal sites. What you sacrifice in convenience and safety, you gain back in selection and the lack of fees. But what do I use to watch anime? Well, what I use and what I'd recommend you use is a mix of everything. I use Crunchyroll for most things. I would say upwards of 70% of my anime viewing happens on there. I have Netflix and will watch their originals. I also buy anime from time to time when I feel compelled to do so. Illegal streaming sites fill in the cracks that show up. Sometimes there really just isn't any other realistic way to watch anime. And for anyone who wants to take a moral high ground, I'd encourage you to pause and think about how you'd solve the issue with above-board streaming services. I'm all ears if you have a solution that is feasible for most people. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. This is going to be the end of the where you should watch anime discussion. After this, I'm going to touch a little bit more on what I said at the beginning of the video, so if you aren't interested in that, go ahead and close this video. Before you go, however, maybe consider subscribing and leaving a big old thumbs up on the video because that would be pretty cool.